Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch. We are back after about a week. We just had our first regionals here in Vancouver, BC in like the last 9 years. It's been crazy to think that we just got an event back, especially after, the whole pandemic and everything. So big shout out here, everyone from Vancouver and those people that came up from like Seattle, Vancouver Island, Kelowna, everywhere else. Also a big shout out to Jim, who won the whole regionals with MathMech. Make sure that you guys check out his deck profile on the channel from yesterday's video. Anyways guys, today we are starting to look forward a little bit. We just had Japanese nationals and we're constantly also getting stuff spoiled from Japan for future sets here in the TCG. So it's always important for us to look ahead because a lot of the time decks and techs that do well in the OCG will perform similarly here in the TCG. Let's get started. Alright, so kicking things off, we're taking a look at a couple of different pendulum cards. So Japanese nationals were just held over the weekend, and they are a little bit ahead of us in terms of set release, but in Darkwing Blast there is some new Draco Slayer pendulum support, and with that, Draco Slayers actually took 2nd and 4th place at the event, which is really surprising considering that they weren't really on anyone's radar before this. The pendulum support cards of course looked strong, but it isn't until now that we got some tangible results to back this claim up. And of course they do have Electromite in the OCG as well, which is a game-changing card on its own. So first off, we're going to take a look at Odd Eyes Revolution Dragon, a relatively new card. This is a level 12 monster that is able to pop itself while it's in the scale to summon a Dragon Fusion, Synchro, or Ixies from your graveyard. You can also discard it to search for a level 8 or lower Dragon Pendulum monster from your deck. It does have some other on-field effects, but I don't think that those effects really get used that often since this card is pretty difficult to actually summon. Anyways, Odd Eyes Revolution Dragon was played at 3 in each of the Draco Slayer deck lists, able to search cards like Luster Pendulum and Master Pendulum to help facilitate pendulum summoning more quickly, and of course it is a scale 12 as well, which is a great high scale to have access to. Odd Eyes originally came out in Rise of the Duelist, which is kind of starting to seem like Star Strike Blast with all of the cards from there that keep on seeming to spike in price. Those original secret rares weren't that high before, they tanked even further when the Megatons came out and reprinted Odd Eyes Revolution Dragon, but they are now back up to $20 a piece on TCG Player, while the Ultras are still only $1 or $2. Because the card is still new and fairly accessible, there's a very significant price gap between the two cards. So moving forward from here, you guys will want to keep an eye on the Odd Eyes Revolution Dragon and see if the hype dies down from its initial jump after the deck's unexpected top, or if the deck continues to perform at a high level consistently and the card stays expensive. Personally, if it were me, I would be offloading the secret rares, but make sure that you guys pick up the Ultras. Without Electromite, I just think the deck won't see the same success here in the TCG, but just in case, I'd want to have some copies of the card available to use. One other pendulum card for us to take a look at next is Magispecter Raccoon Bunbuku. It's been a really long time since I thought about Magispecters. I remember really enjoying playing Magispecter Metal Foes back in the day. Kieran was just like this crazy strong card that was such a pain to deal with. Anyways, Bunbuku is now seeing play in the Draco Slayer deck as well. Bunbuku is a +1 that can search for another copy of itself on summon, and because Magispecter monsters can't be targeted, this means that the card is immune to things like Infinite Impermanence or Effect Failure. It has a bit of synergy with the new Majesty Pegasus the Draco Slayer as well, because if Bunbuku is in the other scale, you can use Majesty Pegasus to search for any other Draco Slayer pendulum monster and then destroy a card in your pendulum zone. So this really helps the deck to get access to an additional scale or multiple additional bodies to summon out, and absolute worst case scenario, Bunbuku is a body to keep on the field that you can then use to make either Electromite or Beyond the Pendulum. Now unlike Odd Eyes, Bunbuku is quite an old card. It has just the Megaton reprint and the original printing from Dimension of Chaos, both of them being ultra rares, and either version right now is going to cost you about $10 a piece. Now, as much as pendulums look cool, I think there is still room for the hype to die down and for this card's price to cool off. Expect it to fall back down to around the $5 to $6 mark within the next couple of weeks. Of course, from there, it still depends on how well Draco Slayers are able to do within the meta. Similarly to Odd Eyes, if you're really interested in playing the deck, I might keep a set for myself. However, I would definitely look at offloading your extra copies since the card does become a prime reprint target the closer that we get to the release of Darkwing Blast. Up next, we're taking a look at Traptrix Reflegia. So the news came out today kind of out of nowhere. Apparently the OCG is going to be getting a Traptrix structure deck. It actually sounds really cool. It's just kind of a random archetype to choose. Trap tricks are of course a trap-based strategy, and they've never really been all that competitive, especially with cards like Twin Twister, Lightning Storm, and Evenly Matched in the game. However, they have a couple of really interesting cards with a lot of potential, so it'll be interesting to see what kind of support they get. A lot of the Trap Tricks cards are relatively low rarity and have multiple printings, and therefore they're pretty cheap with not a lot of room to spike in price. One exception, however, is Trap Tricks Reflegia, a generic rank 4 monster that basically lets you activate a trap hole from your deck where it's appropriate. This used to be used in Pendulums as a generic rank 4 option, but it hasn't seen too much play recently. However, of course, as a Trap Tricks card, this makes it so that your Trap Tricks monsters cannot be targeted, so it's naturally a buyout target for the upcoming structure deck. Now, the ultimate rares have actually jumped the most. They were around $25 to $30. They're now up to over $40 a piece. And then we also have the secret rares. There's two versions, the original and then Megaton reprint. There wasn't a huge bump up in price. They are currently around $4 to $5 each. Even though this card isn't too expensive quite yet, you should definitely be aware of if you own the card, because there is a lot of potential here, especially as we get closer to the release of the structure deck. Expect Reflegia to be reprinted in the structure deck itself, but probably as a common. Now, I personally really like the way that the secret rare versions of this card look, so that's the one that I'm going to be holding on to. Ultimately though, it does come down to your preference, and if you guys are okay with potentially playing just a common version, or if you want to play a nicer, higher rarity copy and bling out your deck. The next card we're talking about for today is Borolo Dragon. Now, this is a card that is starting to see an increase in play over in the OCG. Now, in Sprite, it's very common for the deck to end on a copy of IP Masquerena, and from there go into either Underworld Goddess or Crusadia Avermax, each of which becomes very difficult to deal with since Masquerena makes the monster immune to destruction. While Borolo Dragon is being looked at as an answer to this, Borolo Dragon can't be targeted by card effects, and at the start of the damage step, if this card battles with an opponent's monster, you get to steal it and place it into your zone that it points to, but then send it to the graveyard at the end of the next turn. Really interesting way to get rid of your opponent's problematic monster, especially if you use your own IP to make the Borolo Dragon. Then you have a 3000 attack point body that can't be targeted or destroyed that also gets to steal your opponent's monsters, which is really scary. Now, Borolo Dragon actually has several different printings, including a common from the Rocket structure deck, and then an ultra rare alternate art from Dual Power, which is only a couple of dollars. However, it's the card's two secret rare versions that are now pretty expensive. The Megaton versions are $10 each, but the original secret rares from Circuit Break are all the way up at $30 a piece, which is really crazy. There's very few quantities available on the market, and this is crazy, especially because each of these versions was like $3 to $5 just a couple of weeks ago. I know this card was popular before, so realistically, I think we do just need to give people a bit of time to put their copies up for sale, and we will see the price come down gradually. This is just an OCG tech for right now, and the card isn't really being used much in the TCG at the moment. Only time is going to tell us if the card is actually viable within our metagame. Next up is a pretty random card. It is Digesto Phoenix. This is a generic rank 2 monster that requires 2 level 2 monsters to make, and it has a really simple effect. You detach a material from it to target one of your wind monsters, including potentially itself, and then have that monster attack twice this turn. Now, of course, this is a potential tech in Sprite decks, as you can use it to either help push for damage by attacking directly twice, or by using it to get rid of 2 of your opponent's monsters on the field just to get them off the board. I think that you can actually also double this card's attack power with Cat Shark, so maybe that's like a potential 6,000 damage that you can inflict out of nowhere. Anyways, Digesto Phoenix has 2 printings, the secret rare, which is around $25 to $27, and then the DT ultra rare, which is around $18 to $20. This is actually surprising because it's one of the few times where the hidden arsenal printing is more than the DT printing. I think in this case it might be because Hidden Arsenal 6 was such a bad set. Not a lot of it was opened, and there's not as many copies running around on the market. Overall, I'm not too sure. I don't really play Sprite, so I don't know how the deck functions, how often exactly this comes up, or if you even have room for this in your extra deck. Either way though, you should probably be aware of this card's price jump if you have some lying around somewhere. This card hasn't seen meta play in a really long time, so it was actually quite cheap for a long while. see if you want to run it in your own deck, and if not, maybe consider moving it while the price is so high, because this looks like yet another card that is ready for a reprint. The next card is Fusion Substitute. So some of you might remember this card from back in Zodiac format, where you would fuse 2 Zodiac monsters or maybe a Digesto Emerald to make a copy of Elder Entity Norden. Those were some crazy times. Now, however, Fusion Substitute is seeing play in tier limits as a potential tech piece in place of 1 copy of Polymerization, since it's also searchable with King of the Swamp. It's very similar, but instead of a regular fusion summon, you can only fuse using the materials from your field, not from your field and hand. The idea of unbricking with Polymerization in tier limits generally involves fusing from your hand and fusing from your field, only is like a little bit more difficult to do, albeit not impossible. In exchange though, it has a really neat graveyard effect. Here, if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it, put a fusion monster from your graveyard back to the extra deck, and then draw a card as well. So it provides value after you use it, or even if you mill it with the effect of a tier limit monster. I think it's strictly like you either run 1 copy or 0, but that kind of depends on how you play and your own personal preference. Fusion Substitute has a ton of different printings. Most of them are common, so you can grab them for like $1 or something. However, there is only the 1 super rare version from back in Fusion Enforcers, which is going to cost you around $5 a piece. This is a card that's just worth noting since it was only like a 50-cent holo or something like that for quite a while. Of course, if you're okay with a common or just not playing the card at all, go ahead and dump your holo versions of this while they're finally seeing meta play once again. And finally, guys, the last card we're taking a look at for today is Galaxy Eyes Afterglow Dragon. So just yesterday, we found out that the core set coming after Darkwing Blast is called Photon Hypernova, and it features a ton of different Photon support cards. This has, of course, caused a bunch of people to look at various cards that support the archetype, and I think that Afterglow Dragon is definitely one to pay attention to. It's a free special summon from hand if you control a Galaxy Eyes monster, and if you detach it as an Xyz material to activate an effect, you get to take a Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon from either your hand or deck, and either summon it or attach it to one of your Xyz monsters. Really cool extender here that essentially provides you 2 bodies in 1 card. I feel like this is probably something you'd run 2 copies of, though to be fair, I don't really know the deck all that well. However, I definitely think it is worth keeping an eye on this card and maybe even picking up a few copies while it's still relatively cheap. The card has generally been like $10 for most of its lifetime. Within the last couple of months, we've seen it bump up to around $15, and it's currently sitting at $16 on TCG Player. However, we want to remember that this card was only ever printed as one of these secret rare promos from Legendary Duelist Season 2. It's 10 different secret rares, but only 8 boxes per display. So it's like statistically less than 1 of this card per display, which is kind of crazy. We've seen other cards from similar sets at similar price points, right? So cards like Blue Eyes Abyss Dragon, Millennium Eyes Restrict, those cards have gotten quite expensive. So with the new Photon support, I really wouldn't be surprised to see Afterglow Dragon go exactly the same way. Because it is still worth a decent amount now, I don't think it's feasible to go out and buy like a ton of copies of this card, right? Especially since if it gets reprinted, that's not a great thing for your investment. However, I think that if you're at your locals and you can pick up a few copies here or there for like $12, $13 around there, you're probably leaving yourself enough of a cushion where you can sell it once it gets hyped up more without taking on too much more additional risk. Alright guys, that is it for today's episode. As always, there's so much new stuff that's coming out every single week it seems, so there's always another wave of buyouts and price spikes all the time. Keep in mind that we have the Megatins right around the corner, and those are looking like some crazy good value. You guys will definitely want to allocate some of your budgets for that. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch episode, please make sure that you let me know by slamming that thumbs up button for me. Also, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think about the cards that we talked about today and what other cards are trending on the market so I can cover them in a future episode as well. Also, if you haven't already, do make sure that you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.